Hi everyone, William here for the first post-Christmas 2025 uh, installment of the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 Diary series. Those of you who celebrate Christmas, I hope you had a good one. I've got one of my gifts from a Russian friend was Romanov tea. So you've got the first Romanov Tsar, Mikhail, Michael, and of course the last, the ill-fated Nicholas II. I haven't tried the tea yet. It's green tea, so we'll see what Romanov tea is like. Okay, our recap from last time. We did the 27th and 28th of October, 1917. The 27th was Dmitri going off on a gazelle hunt with the Persian Minister of Justice, Firuz, and that didn't go particularly well, if you recall. And the next, the diary entry of the 28th, was about a dance at the Tehran club. Dmitri was very impressed by the music and the parquet floor and the quality of the dancing among the guests, but it was not a fun time for him because he'd found out about the Bolshevik Revolution, and there was a balalaika orchestra formed by the Persian Cossack division, and they were playing some waltzes that he was very familiar with from back home, social occasions back home, and so those that was hard for him. He says he almost cried. All right, so as is typical for Dmitri, now that he's filled in the days between, I think, what was it, the 20th and the 28th of October, he's jumping ahead to the 7th of November. So in the daily entries, he's never writing those on the actual day. So for instance, the diary entry of Saturday, the 28th of October, was not written on Saturday, the 28th of October, as a typical diarist would do it, but was written several days later, around 10 days later. But this one, the long ones, he's writing on the day or over the course of a few days. And so this one is dated 7th November, 1917, which is a Tuesday. And it's serious stuff. So let's get going. What's happening in Petrograd and Moscow in connection to the Maximalist uprising is completely incomprehensible. The information coming in is terribly muddled and contradictory, and there are so many rumors that it's impossible to know what's really happening. According to Reuters' report, which arrived yesterday, the situation is horrible. The last telegram is from 3rd November. The blood freezes reading about the horrors. It is said that the Bolsheviks have definitively triumphed. Tsarskaya Selo passed 2 times from hand to hand and finally remained in the hands of the Maximalists. Kerensky is in hiding. Petrograd and Moscow are both in the hands of the Bolsheviks. The telegrams say that the battles fought in both capitals were very bloody. In Moscow, they fired cannon at the city Duma and blank in private homes. On the side of the government were the Junkers and cadets, the latter of whom suffered great losses. The battles on the streets of Moscow dragged on for an entire week and finally ended in a complete victory for the Maximalists. They also say in Reuters that a socialist cabinet is being formed with Lenin at its head. The Bolshevik program calls for the independence of the separate regions of Russia, peace at all cost, and the transfer of privately owned land to the hands of land committees for redistribution to the people. Everyone will receive as much as he can work without hired hands. Nonsense and utopianism, Dmitri puts in parentheses. So that's the kind of information that's coming in from Reuters. And then there are rumors that the mob is looting the Winter Palace, breaking things and slashing paintings. On the other hand, there is the assumption that the information from Reuters should be taken with a grain of salt because the lines of communication in Petrograd are controlled by the Maximalists, who pass along only the information that they themselves are comfortable with. Okay, so we need to keep in mind as we talk about this that Dmitri frames it by saying according to. He doesn't say these are the facts. He says this is what is coming from Reuters and from, rumors and various other sources, according to Reuters, not according to me, he's not saying. Okay, so maximalists, just a reminder, a word that he uses as other people did interchangeably with Bolsheviks. And this is, gosh, a very accurate picture of what it must have been like for anybody outside of Russia trying to piece together what was going on. It's completely incomprehensible, muddled and contradictory rumors. So, he has to weigh the sources and the likelihood and try and assemble true information as best he can. And at the end of this section that I've just read, of course, he adds some more skepticism to that because of the idea that Reuters is getting official information from the maximalists, from the Bolsheviks who have taken over the telegraph and the information and communication services. So, that's a good thing to be skeptical about. But the truth is that this information that he's presented right here is very accurate. Overall, it's very accurate description of what was happening. Yes, Tsarskaya Selo had changed hands. Had been a focus of fighting. Nicholas and Alexandra, of course, by that time were not there. They'd been sent further east already, so that did not put them in danger. Although if it had, it would have probably been danger worth facing, because maybe they could have gotten out during one of the times when it was in the hands of the anti-Bolshevik forces. I don't know. That's ridiculous speculation. Okay, so let's talk about the Junkers and cadets. Just a quick clarification. So Junkers schools were for boys from good families, but not rich families, not hugely prestigious families, just ordinary families. So this was part of the military reforms of the 1860s, that you had these Junker schools. And if you graduated from a Junker school and you were a Junker in a regiment, you were not quite an officer. But you were treated as someone who would be an officer. And the word, of course, comes from the German Junker. So, yeah, those were the Junker schools. The cadets, on the other hand, came from the more elite. Every city, municipality, Moscow, Petrograd, had its own corps of cadets. And, yeah, these were the sons of more elite families than those in the Junker school. Although, well, I've just been rereading War and Peace, and of course they didn't have Junker schools yet at that time. It was pre-reform. But when Count Nikolai Rostov joins the army, he begins as a Junker, so not quite an officer, but he gets promotion to officer, to lieutenant, after surviving his first battle. Anyway, this was accurate about these boys from the military schools, whether it was the Corps of Cadets or the Junker schools, fighting on the side of the provisional government and defending the Winter Palace and defending other establishments and losing their lives in a lot of cases. High school age boys. By American terms. And this idea of the Winter Palace being raided, that of course did happen, the most famously with respect to the wine cellar, that soldiers got in there and just, had a great time with this rare and very valuable in many instances wine. The other stuff about slashing paintings and breaking things, I'm sure that happened, but I don't think it was just as if the whole place was trashed or anything like that. But roughly accurate. And then, I'm impressed that Dmitri is not just sort of saying, here's what the rumors are, but actually taking the time to look at the Bolsheviks' program and commenting on it. So land in the hands of the peasants, yes, that was a promise, and yes, it was more or less in effect, but not for very long. 1917, 1918 are the years I have for that. And then, the land would be taken over by the government, of course, and the peasants would not find that they had things so much better than they had before, because they still didn't have ownership of the land or community ownership of the land. Their crops could be requisitioned and that sort of thing, as they were in many instances. Okay, the idea of peace at all cost, yes, that would turn out to be the case. And the idea of allowing these different parts of the empire to become independent, Ukraine and Finland and so on and so forth, and that would be in effect until 1922, when the Civil War was over and the Soviets became the established government. You still had, of course, Finland and the Baltic states and the what else was I going to say? Not Ukraine, but you still had some of them holding on to their independence, but not because the government. If the government could have taken those territories back, it would have. If the Soviets could have taken those territories back, they tried with Finland in 1939. Anyway, Dmitri denounces as nonsense and utopianism this idea that a person would receive as much land as he himself or he and his family could work. And of course he's right. That is nonsense and utopianism. You have to hire help, especially during the harvest. So that was never going to work. All right. What do we have next time? Well, next time we have the polar opposite. This is Dmitri's rendition of what Reuters is saying about everything being dire. And next time he's going to talk about what he's hearing that is actually good news from different sources and why he thinks that good news is credible. He's enough of a skeptic to not just say, oh, all of this about, the definitive Bolshevik takeover is nonsense. But he is vulnerable to hearing good news and speculation saying, this proves that the news is good, so on and so forth. So that is what we're going to have next time. And it's really interesting to compare those two takes on those two views, conflicting views on what is likely going on in Russia. And we can see that, he's not getting information from family members and friends. He's getting his information from the wire service, from what's coming into the British legation, from people crossing the border, trying to piece it all together. Anyway, I will stop yammering and please come back next time. All right, bye.